Hi there, I'm Margaret McGuirk, the head guide at Phoenix Park Visitor Centre, and I'm in this wonderful walled Victorian kitchen garden here in the Phoenix Park, up at the Ashtown area of the Phoenix Park. This is a Victorian walled garden, a kitchen garden, and they were usually divided into 4 sections, so they would have a rotation scheme within the garden then, so there wasn't a build-up of pests and diseases within the soil, we say, with the brassicas on one side, potatoes on another, legumes, etc., all the way through. Now, we have a herb bed here in the park, within the garden, and it's wonderful because we're able then to experiment with the various herbs in the cooking here in the restaurant, and we can also have a look at herbs in general. To start with, herbs were mainly introduced by the Romans. They came from very warm climates, so therefore that gives us an indication as to how you would grow the herbs. You would need well-drained, warm soil, if you like. You're not going to put them into a heavy clay soil where their roots would be damp and get wet and be waterlogged perhaps in the winter months. So you kind of kick back to where they originated from, in the Mediterranean region where it was warm and it was arid and there was well-drained soil. To start with, an awful lot of the herbs that were introduced by the Romans were carried with them for medicinal purposes. We have the likes of comfrey, which I'll show you a little later on. That was known as knitbone, and it was also used as a poultice to draw out splinters and that type of thing. They would make a poultice usually with something like the equivalent of white bread and milk or water, introduce then the comfrey and then lay it on the wound and wrap it very tight, and they believed then that that would help knit the bones. Apart from medicinal purposes and culinary uses, they were also used as a tussie-mussy. Tussie-mussy was when they had just clay roads, they didn't have proper infrastructure within the cities mainly, and the smells were horrific. You had people emptying their chamber pots into the streets, you had slaughterhouses on the streets, etc., etc. So the smells were pretty vile. So a lot of the ladies would carry what was called a tussie-mussy, and that was a mixture of herbs, and they would actually crack them then when they came to a bad area in the street, release the volatile oils, and therefore they didn't have to inhale these smells on such a grand scale. Later on then, these became known as vinaigrettes. They would put a little drop of vinegar in with some of the volatile oils into the most beautiful little compacts, if you like, of silver and gold that had tracings within inside them, so they would release the fragrances, and the ladies in their carriages, etc., could inhale them. They were also like a smelling salt, so they were used for that purpose in those days. The first group of herbs I'm going to talk about are mints. And this particular mint here is a banana mint. You can see that it's a much paler leaf than your normal spearmint or peppermint. Mints are wonderful. Everything from, if you've been eating garlic, if you chew on some mint or some parsley, it's said to cleanse the palate. But also for a variety of culinary uses, you can use the mint. The only thing I would say is that you always keep it in a pot. We here in the park have enough room that we can grow it in beds. However, in your normal garden, you would keep it in a pot. It is said that if you plant mint at the back wall of your garden, by the time you get to your back door, it will have raced ahead of you. So just to be careful with it, because it does spread and it's very difficult then to get it out if it's entangled in other plants in the garden. But it is an invaluable herb. You can add it to everything from salads to soups to etc. You can actually freeze it as well into little ice cubes. You can freeze it and put it in and use it as a drink. Over here we have our oregano. And again, it speaks for itself. Of course, we always identify oregano with Italian cooking, and again, a Mediterranean herb. The bees absolutely love the flowers on the oregano at the moment. And again, the volatile oils are released when you crush the leaves. We would use it in cooking. And for medicinal purposes as well, it was used as a cleanser to cleanse the body and to cleanse the blood, along with nettles. Nettles was seen as another herb that would also, in springtime, you would make a tincture and it would cleanse the blood. Now, here we have rosemary. It was said that it was Our Lady's plant because when the blue flowers come out, it was believed that Our Lady had spread her blue cloak over the plant, and therefore this is why it had its blue flowers. Particularly in Victorian times, it was used for both weddings and funerals, for remembrance. Comes from the name, of course, rosemary, for remembrance. So you would always throw some rosemary into the grave when somebody was being buried, but you would also use it for remembering your loved one in a bouquet, along with myrtle and a few other historical plants that you would put into the bride's bouquet. The bride's bouquet, while I'm covering that, actually comes from the tussie mussy, the bad smell that you would have had on the streets. And going to the altar, the bride wanted to look her best, so they would have used a lot of bouquets or flowers or tussie mussies to dull down the really bad odours that were around in Victorian times. Oils, again, in this are really, really strong, absolutely delicious for culinary uses, very easy to take a striking or a cutting from it. You just take it at the leaf base there, stick it in, and they usually come on quite easily. This here is bronze fennel, and we have a lot of that growing in the garden here in the Phoenix Park. We would also have dill. It is said that you don't plant them close together because they can cross-pollinate. The smell is absolutely delicious. It's almost like a licorice smell, and it's an umbellifer. It's like an umbrella, as you can see the way it opens out. The seeds would be used in cooking. But you can also dry the seeds. The beauty of it is you can dry the seeds and use them in the winter time. And they're also very good for indigestion if you want to chew on the seeds. The leaves then you would use in cooking. You would use it with fish. Really delicious. Very, very easy to grow. Again, another Mediterranean plant. And I'll move over now to sage. This very striking herb here is golden sage. We also have the common sage. This one is the golden sage, used in cooking. Sage reminds an awful lot of people of Christmas time because of the smell, because of the stuffing. This here is a golden sage. We also have the common sage that we're all familiar with. Very easy to dry. Just clip it, tie it upside down, with some string, leave it for a few weeks, and it will dry hard, and then you can crush it and put it into jars, and it will keep for about 2 years. Now I'm going to brag about this part of the garden because this looks absolutely fantastic, and I must say that it's Mida and Brian who grow all this stuff in the garden along with Graham, and they've done a fantastic job yet again this year. What we have here is the wonderful lavender. And it's like a field of lavender here. I feel like I'm in Provence. The fragrance is absolutely magical. The bees love it. Can be a little temperamental. Just always think, where has it come from? It's come from the Mediterranean, so therefore that's the type of soil it likes. So here, Brian and Mida have put it on a raised section, very well drained soil, usually horticultural grit underneath that, and therefore it can be well drained and absolutely loves the sun. And in the walled garden, it just, it's just at home here because the walls keep in the heat. You can actually dry it, turn it upside down, dry it, and then you can put it into all kinds of potpourri. People don't realise they go out and they spend money on various oils for their burners, but actually if you put some water on your burner and just put a few lavender sprigs on top, you will actually get the same effect right throughout the house. If you have somebody that is having a problem with sleeping, they would usually do a little bag or something, a little container, and put the dried seeds into it and put it under your pillow, and you would have a good night's sleep. Again, very strong volatile oils. The thing is, now around this time of the year, in the end of July, beginning of August, the best thing to do is start to cut it down. So you start to cut it down, and you cut it down into just the top of the leaf. You don't cut it down into the old wood. If you do that, it usually will die off and it won't come back. But if you just keep topping it there, you'll get about 2 or 3 or 4 years out of it. This variety is called Vera. We grow it here in the walled garden because it's said to be one of the best varieties to grow for the bees, because we have the bees here in the park, and we sell the honey at the end of each year. So the fragrance is absolutely divine. You can also put it, when it's dried, into your linen drawers, and it will fragrance the clothes. It will also keep the moths away. Its seeds, if you want to gather it, it around this time of the year, put it into a paper bag, just leave these pieces outside, tie it up, and after a few weeks you will find a lot of black seeds at the end, and you can start them off then for next year, because I said lavender needs to be changed every 2 or 3 years. It gets very woody, so it's a good idea to keep a stock, if you like, and keep every year growing some new stock. We've come down to this section of the garden now, which is where the corridor of wildflowers, mainly for the bees and for pollinators. Yeah, well, what we have here in the wildflower meadow, the wildflower strips here in the walled garden, we have calendula, and of course you can make a wonderful balm with this. Now, the deeper the orange colour, the better of the flower and the oils that you will gain from it. You can actually pick the flowers, put them into some oil, and almond oil is perhaps one of the best. Leave it in a jar with the almond oil, a few heads, maybe 4 or 5 heads, for about 2 weeks. Leave them in the dark, and then you can melt some beeswax and you can add it in maybe with some essential oils, and you'll have a lovely balm, a lip balm and for your hands, and it's all organic, absolutely beautiful, a wonderful, wonderful plant. Here we have the Californian poppy, and it's so pretty the way it opens out, and then you would always know the seed heads because they have these little pointed caps like a little elf's cap there in the middle. Here we have corn cockle, a very old herb that of course would have been seen in the fields back in Victorian times. That will open into a beautiful pink flower, and again a lot of medicinal herbs here too. This here is marjoram we have at the edge of the wild border, and of course we have our heritage variety of apple trees, and they are old varieties of apples. Prior to the First World War we would have had hundreds of varieties of apples, but with labour being what it was after the First World War, we didn't have enough people to look after the orchards, and so an awful lot of the old varieties were lost. However, the heritage varieties, a lot of them have been saved, they've been put onto rootstock, and we have this wonderful selection here in the park. Campanula here and the marjoram here is used for companion planting. For instance, we would usually grow this now beside the carrots, because we would have carrot root fly, and so the carrot root fly is he's more or less duped into believing that there are no carrots there because he can smell this particular plant. So that's what companion planting is. We have a huge amount of vegetables here in the walled garden also. We have a lot of potatoes, and we have an awful lot of fruit. We have everything from tayberries, raspberries, blackberries, black currants, red currants, white currants, apples, we have strawberries, we have raspberries. So we're really, really, really spoiled here in the gardens to be able to observe the growing techniques of all of this fruit. I was mentioning to you earlier on about the comfrey, introduced into Britain by the Romans, and they would always carry some of this with them as a knit bone, known as a knit bone, and they would make a poultice with it. This particular variety we have here is called Brocking 14. It's non-invasive, which is fantastic. Your common comfrey can be very, very invasive and take over. Having said that, it's a fantastic plant. You can actually just crush it and leave it around your various plants, your various crops, if you like, in your garden, and the nutrients that are in the leaves then are leached into the soil and would feed the plants. You can also make what's called blackjack, and you can put it into containers, leave it steeping for about 2 or 3 weeks. Smells really, really strong. Not a very nice odour, but you can water it down then 1 to 10 and water your plants once a week. That is your outdoor plants. Don't bring it indoors because the smell is really, really vile. But a great plant altogether. And here then we use this in conjunction with the pears and the plums and the peaches that we grow on the walls. We use the heat of the walls to keep these plants looking well, to get the fruit to ripe fairly fast. And again, we try and stick with very old varieties of fruit and vegetables within the walled garden. This is perhaps the most unusual little herb we have here. You can see here the beautiful colours on it, and North American plant. North American Indians used it. Of course, they used an awful lot of traditional plants in the States, of course, and they also use the likes of sage, both in their sweat lodges and in their sacred pipes during ceremonies, but this was one they used as a toothache plant, and it will numb about half the side of your jaw if you do chew it, and it produces quite a lot of saliva within the mouth as well. Now, this is so adorable that I feel if I couldn't sleep, I'd just lie down here and be asleep in 10 minutes. Just to say thank you very much for looking in the video here. Enjoy Heritage Week. We know the year that's in it. We can't get out there and do an awful lot. However, online we can do tons of things. And if you wish then, if you have some time, do come along to the Phoenix Park, particularly up here at this end. We're not prejudiced at all, but up at this end at Ashtown Castle. Have a look at the beautiful Victorian walled garden. We have something ongoing all of the time in the Phoenix Park Visitor Centre. We know with the lockdown things have changed, but however we have a lot of stuff. Do visit our website on www.phoenixpark.ie. Look at our Instagram site, and we leave all those details at the end of the video, and you can check them out. And do call up. What more could you ask for? Take care.